The child appeared between two dumpsters in the alley behind Nathan's restaurant, and the moment he saw her, he understood, on some wordless, bone-deep level, that nothing about the next few hours would make any sense, and that he would not trade them for anything in the world. She was small, that was the first thing. Small the way a soap bubble is small, the way a candle flame is small, not diminished but concentrated, as though whatever she contained was too important to spread thin. She crouched with her back pressed against the brick wall, her forearms wrapped tightly around her torso, and her bioluminescent skin had faded to a gray so pale it was almost ash. In any other species, Nathan might have called it shock. She was breathing in short, shallow bursts, each exhale leaving a faint shimmer of copper-tinted vapor in the November air. Her eyes, two large vertical pupil eyes the color of deep ocean water, were fixed on the street beyond the alley mouth with an expression Nathan had no cultural framework for. Not exactly fear, more like the total, exhausted alertness of someone who had been running for a very long time and could no longer remember what rest felt like. He almost walked past her. He had 3 garbage bags in his hands. It was 11:40 at night, and the restaurant's walk-in cooler had been making a sound like a dying helicopter since Thursday. He was behind on the lease. His sous chef had quit 2 days ago via text message. He had every reason to keep walking, and no good reason at all to stop. He stopped. The garbage bags hit the ground. He crouched to her level, close enough to see the faint pulse of light beneath the skin of her throat, still there, but faint. And he said the only thing that came to him. "Hey, are you hurt?" She flinched. All forearms tightened. Her pupils contracted to thin lines. She said something in a language that sounded like water moving over stones, and then she went silent, watching him with those ocean-colored eyes, clearly expecting something terrible. He reached into the pocket of his apron and pulled out the only thing he had. Half a granola bar, still in its wrapper. He held it out. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked at him. Then back at the granola bar. The next 7 hours would change both of them permanently, and neither of them would see it coming. Nathan had been running Parallel Kitchen for 4 years, which was either an accomplishment or a slow disaster depending on the day of the week. The restaurant occupied a narrow building on the edge of the city's newly designated integrated district, the 6-block stretch of downtown where the settlement protocols required human businesses to accommodate non-human clientele. He'd opened in what had been a Thai fusion spot, kept the good tiles, replaced the menu, and gradually developed something that defied easy categorization. Earth ingredients prepared using techniques he'd traded for, learned, or in one case stolen, from 3 different alien culinary traditions. It was the only restaurant on the block that had been given a 4-star review by both a human food critic and a Thyron Hari ambassador's cultural attaché, a distinction Nathan privately considered the greatest achievement of his life. He lived above the restaurant in an apartment that was primarily composed of cookbooks, mismatched coffee mugs, and a single impressive fern named Gerald. He had no partner, no pets, no family closer than his sister Mia in Portland, who called him every Sunday and asked when he was going to take a vacation. He was 34. He had a scar along his left collarbone from a kitchen accident when he was 22 that he never talked about, and a specific, finely tuned ability to read the moment when someone was about to cry and needed, more than anything, for someone to simply sit with them and not look away. It was this last quality, not the culinary awards, not the lease, not the sous chef crisis, that had brought him to this particular alley on this particular night with a crouching alien child who was vibrating with the effort of not fleeing. He didn't push the granola bar forward. He just left it in his open palm and waited. The child, he was starting to think of her as a child, though he had no reliable way to assess Thyron Hari age, watched his open hand with an expression that cycled through about 6 different emotions in under 10 seconds. He recognized distrust. He recognized calculation. He recognized something that might have been hunger, though the Thyron Hari didn't process earth carbohydrates the way humans did, so perhaps that was just curiosity about the wrapper. What he didn't expect was the way her gaze finally settled on his face, not the granola bar, and stayed there. She was studying him. He let her. After a full 90 seconds, he counted, she reached out one of her smaller secondary arms and touched the edge of the wrapper. Not taking it, just touching it, as though verifying that he was real and the offering was real, and neither of them would disappear if contact was made. "I'm Nathan," he said quietly. "I work here. This is my restaurant." The words clearly meant nothing to her, but the tone did. Her secondary arm didn't retreat. "You don't have to go anywhere," he said. "I'm not going to call anyone." This was the moment he made a decision he hadn't consciously made yet. He just heard himself say it and discovered it was true. She said something again in that water over stones language, and this time he caught one word he recognized from 3 years of serving Thyron customers, the word for cold, or something close to it. The Thyron concept didn't translate perfectly. It described not just thermal cold, but the particular vulnerability of being cold when warmth was known to exist somewhere nearby, but not for you. He stood up. He held out his hand. She looked at the hand. A Thyron might extend an open hand as a territorial claim, or as a challenge, or in some northern dialect context he vaguely recalled, as an invitation to combat. He didn't know which one she was computing. He kept the hand out anyway. She stood. She did not take the hand, but she followed him inside. The kitchen was warm. That was the first and most immediate thing. The ambient heat of still warm ovens and the pilot lights and the dishwasher that ran its sanitized cycle every hour on a timer. She stopped in the kitchen doorway and breathed it in, and the faded gray of her skin shifted almost immediately toward something warmer, a faint luminescent blue-green, like the color of shallow water over sand. It was the most beautiful thing Nathan had seen in a while, and he was a man who spent considerable professional energy thinking about the visual presentation of food. He pulled a stool to the prep counter. She didn't sit on it. She sat under the counter, on the floor, with her back against the cabinet. He decided this was fine. He pulled his own stool to the other side and sat down, and without making it a production, he started doing what he would have been doing anyway, prepping mise en place for the morning, because if he didn't do it tonight, he would hate himself at 6 a.m. He chopped shallots. He reduced a stock. He moved around the kitchen, doing ordinary, purposeful, quiet things, and the child watched him from the floor with those deep ocean eyes, and some of the terrible tension in her four-armed frame began, fraction by fraction, to ease. She fell asleep around 1 in the morning. He found a clean linen tablecloth and spread it on the floor near the warmest wall, and she migrated to it without waking, curling into a configuration he'd never seen a Thyron adult adopt, limbs tucked inward, bioluminescence cycling slowly through blues and greens, a living nightlight on his kitchen floor. He did not call the authorities. He genuinely wasn't sure why. The why arrived at 3:17 a.m., when the back door opened and the cold came in with it, along with a figure that made Nathan's body perform the involuntary, full-system recalibration of encountering something that registered as profoundly, categorically significant. He'd felt this before, standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon at 16. He'd felt it reading the last page of a book that had broken him open. He'd never felt it about a person. She was tall, Thyron tall, which meant nearly 7 feet, with the elongated secondary joints that gave their species the appearance of being assembled from grace rather than biology. Her skin was deep indigo, shot through with gold, fully lit, not the faint bioluminescence of the child, but something active and intentional, a steady auroral glow that made the stainless steel of the kitchen catch light like a cathedral. She wore no armor. She wore no weapons Nathan could see. She wore what looked like grief, like it was the oldest garment she owned. She was looking at the child on the floor. The sound she made was not a word in any language Nathan knew or didn't know. It was lower than that. It was prior to language. It was the sound of something that had been terrified for a very long time and was no longer terrified and did not yet know what to do with that. "She's okay," Nathan said softly. "She was cold. I brought her in." The tall alien turned toward him and he understood, with complete clarity, that he was the least threatening person she had seen in a very long time, and that this was confusing her. He had the distinct impression he had just passed some kind of test he didn't know he was taking. Her name, as she eventually communicated it, in pieces, using the limited trade common that some Thyron learned for commerce, was Avith. The child was Nixa, her daughter. They had been on the run for 11 days, moving through the integrated district at night, sleeping in decommissioned structures the city had not yet repurposed. Avith had left Nixa in what she believed was a safe alcove while she ranged ahead to scout the route. Nixa had followed her, become turned around in the alley network, and found Nathan's dumpsters instead. Avith communicated all of this in approximately 40 words of trade common and a significant quantity of direct, unblinking eye contact that Nathan was not culturally equipped to interpret. He later learned that sustained eye contact in Thyron communication was reserved for individuals one considered either a mortal threat or a bound witness, someone who was being asked to hear something true. He had been placed in the second category. He didn't know this yet. He just held the eye contact and listened. He put water on. He made tea, the specific mineral-heavy blend he kept for Thyronhari customers because the chemistry matched better with their fluid balance. He set 2 mugs on the prep counter and sat down and waited. She did not sit. She stood near Nixa, one long-fingered hand resting lightly on the child's shoulder, and she drank the tea standing. But she drank it. That was something. "Why are you running?" he asked. His trade common was rudimentary at best, customer service level, menu explanation level, but she understood the question. The answer came in pieces, over the next 2 hours, assembled from fragments of trade common and gestures and moments where she would pause, and he would nod, and she would appear to recalibrate and try another route toward the meaning. The picture that emerged was this. Avith was not merely a refugee. She was not merely a mother in a desperate situation. She was, as far as Nathan could follow, the surviving carrier of a Thyronhari lineage encoding, a biological cultural archive, threaded into her cellular structure across 17 generations, containing the unbroken record of a people the Consolidated Authority had spent the last 3 years systematically trying to erase. And Nixa, her daughter, was the next vessel, the next keeper of everything. Nathan sat with this for a moment. "And someone is looking for you," he said. She looked at him. "Right now?" he said. She set down the mug. The sound of boots on the alley pavement outside, multiple sets moving fast, arrived at the same moment as Nix's eyes snapping open from the floor. If you're finding yourself pulled into this story, consider subscribing to the channel. There are dozens more like this one waiting for you, and they keep coming. Nathan moved without deciding to move. This was, he would think later, the most important thing about him that he had never fully understood until that moment. That when the moment required action before thought, his body knew what it valued. He crossed the kitchen, hit the lights, and in the dark said, "Backstairs, now, quietly." He didn't know if Avith understood. He heard Nixa make a soft sound. Then he heard 2 sets of footsteps follow him across the kitchen floor. The back stairs led to his apartment. He took them in the dark by muscle memory, counting steps the way he'd counted them 10,000 times at the end of late nights, and behind him he heard the careful near silence of 2 people moving with more natural stealth than he possessed. The Thyronhari evolved in terrain that demanded quiet. They were, at their origin, creatures of patience and precision. Even a child of Nix's apparent age moved through the dark stairwell without a single audible footstep. In his apartment, he guided them by the faint ambient light of the city through the window, to the back room, the small storage space behind the bedroom that he used for the overflow of cookbooks and Gerald's cousin Ferns. He closed the door. He put his back against it. He could hear, through the walls and the floor, the sound of the back door opening. Voices. At least 3. Official Consolidated Authority frequency. He recognized the clipped cadence from 2 years ago, when an inspection team had come through the integrated district and spent 40 minutes interrogating him about his sourcing practices. Nixa pressed against his leg in the dark. He reached down, found her nearest hand, 3 fingers and a thumb, slightly cool, holding on, and held it. Avith was completely still in a way that didn't feel like human stillness. Human stillness was effortful. This was something else. This was the stillness of a person who had become so accustomed to concealment that the body had integrated it, made it structural, turned survival into posture. The voices moved through the kitchen below. He heard the freezer door. He heard a prep counter move. He heard, very briefly, an argument in official register Thyronhari that he couldn't follow, and then silence, and then the sound of the back door again, and then nothing. He counted to 300 before he moved. When he opened the storage room door and the city light came back, Nixa was still holding his hand. She was looking up at him with those deep ocean eyes, and in the dim light her skin had shifted to something Nathan had not seen before. A warm amber gold, almost like candlelight, pulsing slowly. He had worked with enough Thyronhari to know that bioluminescent gold was generally associated with safety, with shelter, with the concept their language encoded as the condition of being known and not harmed. She thought she was safe because of him. He looked at Avith, who was watching him from across the room with an expression he now had slightly more context to read. She was doing what she had been doing in the kitchen, the eye contact of a bound witness. Only now it was different. Now there was something in it that was neither grief, nor calculation, nor the exhausted alertness of perpetual flight. He'd seen this expression before. Not on an alien. On his mother, the night she'd come to pick him up after the kitchen accident at 22, when he'd been in the hospital for 6 hours, and she'd walked into the room and seen him sitting up and talking. That look that says, I was prepared for the worst. You gave me something else. I don't know yet what to do with the relief. I have a friend, Nathan said. Her name is Mia. She works with a relocation organization. Not official, unofficial. She's helped people before. He paused. People who were being looked for. He reached into his pocket for his phone, stopped, looked at Avith. Can I make a call? I want you to hear it. She was quiet for a moment. All the bioluminescence in her skin slowed to the deep, steady rhythm of something arriving at a decision. Then she crossed the room, 4 steps, she was so tall, and she stood close enough that she would hear every word, and she nodded once. He dialed Mia. She answered on the second ring, which meant she was still awake, which meant she had been working, which meant she was already halfway to ready. He explained in the shorthand of siblings and long-time shared crisis. Significant, not official, immediate, 2 people. She asked 3 questions. He answered them. She said she could be there in 90 minutes, and she would need the back door. He hung up. He looked at Avith. 90 minutes, he said. He held up his hands, fingers spread, 9 times. Then someone who can help. Avith looked at his hands. In Thyranhari spatial language, an open palm presented with fingers spread was a statement of debt acknowledged, a recognition that something owed could not yet be repaid. She did not know he was counting. She thought he was telling her that he was aware of his obligation to her. She responded in kind, both her primary arms extended, hands open, fingers spread, a gesture of mutual debt, the full form, the complete version, the one used only between people of comparable standing. He almost laughed. He didn't, because it would have been the wrong moment. But later, when he understood what she'd said, he thought about it often. Nixa fell back asleep on the floor of his storage room, her small body curled against a stack of cookbooks, glowing amber in the dark. Avith finally sat, with her back against the wall, and Nathan sat across from her with 2 inches of cold tea, and they remained together in the particular silence of people who have moved past the need to explain themselves to each other. At some point, very quietly, Avith began to speak, not trade common, her own language, in a low, continuous murmur that he couldn't follow, but the shape of it felt like the shape of a story, the cadence of something told from the beginning, told in sequence, told to someone trusted. She wasn't explaining, she wasn't translating. She was witnessing herself, out loud, in front of another person, for perhaps the first time in a very long time. He listened as though he understood every word. When Mia arrived, 93 minutes later, she took in the scene with the particular calm of someone who had seen many extraordinary things and refused to let any of them make her careless. She was shorter than Nathan, sharper, with the specific competence of a person who had built her entire professional identity around being the one who showed up. She looked at Nixa, asleep in the cookbooks. She looked at Avith, who rose to her full height, and regarded Mia with the measured assessment of someone evaluating whether this new variable was a threat. Mia held out her hand, flat, open, fingers together, a human offer of handshake. Avith looked at the hand. In Thiranhari formal context, an open hand presented fingers together meant, I yield. I place myself beneath your authority. Nathan saw the miscalculation half a second too late to correct it, but Avith took Mia's hand anyway. She wrapped one large primary hand around Mia's, and the contact lasted exactly as long as a handshake, and then she let go, and something in her posture had changed. She had accepted the yielding. She had chosen to trust it. Nathan decided this was the most complicated handshake in the history of human Thiranhari relations, and that it had worked out, and that sometimes things worked out because people were trying, even when they were trying wrong. Mia had a route. She had documents, the kind that existed in systems consolidated authority cross-referencing didn't reach. She had a place outside the district, a house maintained by the network, where Avith and Nixa could rest, and then move towards something safer and more permanent. She laid it out in quiet, precise detail, and Nathan translated what fragments he could, and Avith listened and watched Mia's face, and made the decision to trust her in the same way she had made the decision to drink the tea. Not naively, not wholly, but enough. Nixa woke up when Avith touched her shoulder. She looked at Nathan first. The amber gold returned immediately, that warm pulse of his apartment and the cookbooks, and the hand held in the dark. He crouched to her level, the way he had in the alley, and she reached into one of her inner pockets and held something out. It was a small stone, smooth, dark, with a faint natural iridescence, the kind of mineral he'd seen in imports from the Thiranhari home system, the kind that carried, he seemed to remember, a specific cultural meaning. He took it with both hands, which was apparently correct because Nix's luminescence flared briefly to something bright and satisfied. He looked at Avith. Keeper, she said, the trade common word for it. He didn't know yet, wouldn't know until he researched it weeks later, that in Thyranhari tradition, a keeper stone was given only to those who had been formally woven into a lineage's memory. That by accepting it, he had become, in some small permanent way, part of the record she carried in her cells. That Nixa had decided, with the authority that apparently ran in this family, that he belonged in the story they were going to survive to tell. They left through the back door before dawn. He watched the alley until the dark swallowed them, and then he stood alone in the kitchen with the cool morning light just beginning to gray the window above the prep counter. The linen tablecloth was still on the floor, 2 mugs, a small iridescent stone in his palm. He thought about a granola bar, still in its wrapper. He thought about a hand held in a dark staircase by 3 cool fingers and a thumb. He thought about a woman who had carried an entire people inside her, and still had room for grief, and still had room for tea, and still had room, after 11 days of running, to recognize the difference between someone who meant harm and someone who simply opened a door. He had not saved them. He was clear about this. They had been moving, surviving, enduring long before he opened that back door, and they would continue after. What he had done was smaller than saving and more specific. He had been present, in the right place, at the moment when presence was what was needed, and he had not looked away. The walk-in cooler made its dying helicopter sound. He set the stone on the prep counter where the morning light could find it. Then he washed his hands, tied his apron, and started making mise en place for a day that would be, by every external measure, completely ordinary, and that he would remember for the rest of his life as the day he understood what it meant to keep something. Some things don't change you gradually. Some things just walk into your alley and hold your hand in the dark, and when they leave, you find the world has rearranged itself around the space they occupied, and you are already different, and the granola bar is already a kind of legend, and you wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way through. It genuinely means a lot. If this moved you even a little, please consider subscribing to the channel, because there are many more stories like this one coming your way. A like and a notification bell would help this story reach more people who need it. See you in the next one.